They say we're loud, opinionated, afraid, telling us to hush, dim our historical light. But darlings, we're the heartbeat, sharp and keen, unveiling the truth behind the silver screen.
History harpies hear us roar. Through the ages we explore. Fashion, film, and TV.
Hi, and welcome to History Harpies.
This is Lauren.
And I'm Christine. This is our 17th episode, Lauren.
I can't believe it.
I can't either. And it's been a while since we were here.
It has been. How was your winter break, Christine?
It was good, I have to say. I went to Maine, where it was freezing cold.
Right.
But that was great. And I got a lot of work done and did some relaxing with my children.
Good.
And so all of that was very nice. How about
you? Mine was, I would say, both good and terrible.
That's a bad combination.
The reason why it was terrible was because the first 2 weeks of it were spent with this new strain of the flu.
Oh, yes.
Which is horrible. I did not get a flu shot this year. I will not make that mistake in the future. I could not pick my head up. I had no energy. And it was just awful. And I had to cancel all kinds of things I was looking forward to. And I was just not in a good place. So the flu was bad, but my boys came back from college and seeing them was awesome. But I will say that college breaks are too long. 4 weeks is too long.
It is a long
for
time.
anyone to be home from college. And it is too long for families to have to have additional people in your house, especially, accommodating around our normal routines. And, when all the fun dies down and you've seen all the friends and you've watched all the movies and you've done
ate all the food,
there is nothing to do. And both of my kids go to colleges where there is a lot to do, and there is much less to do here. So I'm happy that one of them is back. The other will be back tomorrow, and I'm looking forward to them having great semesters and having eaten and done the things they like to do when they're home. But it is just too long.
It is. I remember that from my own college days, that it was long.
Yes,
the
winter
boredom
break.
by the end was
Winter
severe.
break is, unlike spring break where you go home for a week and you can kind of sleep and refresh.
Good amount of time.
But winter break, no.
Well, of course, a good thing, something really wonderful about this time of year is that we get into award season, and we love awards season.
One of the reasons why Christine is one of my favorite people in the world is because she appreciates awards and awards shows as much as I do, and will watch all of them. It doesn't matter. The SAG, the Critics' Choice, the Independent Spirit. Who the fuck cares?
All.
So tonight is the Golden Globes.
Globes.
And we will be getting back together to watch the Golden Globes and see all the Botox and all
the dresses,
the outfits and the speeches and whatever. And actually, I will say, and we'll cover this, when we start talking about our content, right? That this year has much better films, in my opinion, than most years. I don't know, there aren't as many, what is that? I've never heard of that. I've never seen that. Films as there are. This year, I do actually know what the films are.
That is a good thing. That is true. And there also, I would say, this year there aren't films that I despise.
No.
Like Anora. Anora last year, as we discussed on our very first episode.
Right.
That was a very difficult movie because we despised it so much. And I had actually forgotten. I blocked out of my head until yesterday that it, in fact, won Best Picture.
It won Best Picture.
So
I do not think a film that I despise will win Best Picture. And I am very happy about that. And the TV shows, TV is always good. So whatever ends up winning is going to be something I also like.
Yeah.
It's not going to be something I despise.
Yes.
But do you remember the year, not only Anora, but we had the Legend of the, not Legend of the Fall, but the Anatomy of the Fall.
Oh my God.
And it was
that movie was
horrible,
so
slow like movies,
yes.
and then Amelia Perez, and like these things.
The substance.
That you're just like,
I mean,
why?
Awful.
Why? At least this year, there's content, there's creativity, there's historical references, there's some commentary being made, there's some thinking going on.
And that, of course, takes us to our subject for today.
Right.
Which is we want to talk about a few films and maybe one television show that have to do with identity, have to do with people being chased, have to do with politics and political action.
People on the run.
People on the run. And so we wanted to start today by talking about something getting so much awards love, and that is One Battle After Another. Something, of course, that's getting tons of press, nominated for Golden Globes. I'm sure it will be nominated for Oscars, Oh, of course, the SAG Awards have now been renamed. They are now the Actor Awards. You know, same diff.
Right.
And so getting a lot of SAG love.
Lot of SAG
One
love.
Battle After Another. And so this obviously is a film that is extremely contemporary in many ways, but also has a throwback
A lot of throwback
in a lot of ways.
vibes.
Really a film for historians like us to be really interested in and to say a lot about.
Yes. And just to make clear, neither one of us, I think, saw this in the theater.
Correct.
We both saw it on HBO and streaming. And so can't, again, remark on the big screen experience of it. But
I don't think we really needed a big screen experience.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Given how much I enjoyed it, I now would kind of wish I had seen it in the theater. But yeah, it's I can see why it's getting a lot of Oscar love. Whether it deserves it, is another question. But it is a film that is both very, very relevant, but also a commentary on a lot of older films that are in the same genre and that share a lot of the tropes that we'll discuss. So what did you think, Christine, of One Battle? And I have no idea. Although I kind of do have an idea.
Okay, what would your idea be? I'm going to ask before I say anything.
Here's what I was thinking when after I saw the movie, and then was thinking, what will Christine think? And I was thinking, Christine is going to have some concerns about this movie. Christine is going to like some of the performances, but find others lacking. And I don't think that Christine is going to like the overall story. That is my prediction. But I, of course, could be completely wrong.
I think your prediction is almost exactly correct. Perhaps even totally correct. Now, I will say, I mean, I generally am a fan of Paul Thomas Anderson.
Yes.
Right. And saw Boogie Nights when it first came out. I still think it's just,
amazing.
So bold, so ambitious for a young filmmaker. I think it's probably the case that he did too much coke when he was hanging out with Quentin Tarantino. Magnolia, again, admire the ambition. I have not seen a couple of his films that I really wish I still haven't seen Phantom Thread.
There Will Be Blood. I haven't seen Phantom Thread either.
So it was interesting to kind of revisit that. Of course, you and I saw Licorice Pizza together at the movies.
We did.
And both really, really liked it. And at least I remember us really liking it. So the basic thing for me about One Battle After Another, to me, it really obviously is. It's a PTA film that should have been done by Quentin Tarantino.
Correct.
And that you can really see,
the
all
QT,
the DNA is
stamp,
just
all through it.
All through it,
right.
I did think that Leo was fantastic. And what I really do admire about him is he, of course, is so willing to be hideous, to be a mess. I mean, I think that's so great, especially for someone who's committed to only dating women who are 25 and younger.
Correct.
And so I love the lack of vanity. And I think the character is one note, We really don't know very much about the character at all.
No.
The characterization in the film is terrible.
Right.
Absolutely terrible.
And I would actually, as someone who really liked the film, would agree that one of the downsides of this film is I just wanted more of everyone, even for a film that was quite long.
So long, yes.
And I think, yes, you're right. Leo as a burnout who doesn't understand pronouns is just terrific.
Well, and of course, and what makes that so terrific, especially, is that he is playing opposite Sean Penn.
Correct.
Right? And so he's this, in effect, Jeff Spicoli character.
Yes.
And of course, we've already talked about Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Right.
So he's kind of the Jeff Spicoli,
He is.
having gotten older.
He is.
And so I think, that performance I think was fantastic.
Right.
I think the Sean Penn performance was, again, one note.
Right.
But fantastic.
But fantastic. Especially given, I think if it weren't Sean Penn, you might not think it was so great. But knowing Sean Penn's politics, he's playing playing this, this guy who just won't die, and he's like this neo-Nazi, and I mean just all of it is really, I wouldn't say it's really fun, but it is an amazing performance by Sean Penn.
Yes.
And yeah.
What I will say though is that I don't see the film as satire, and my biggest complaint about it was well, maybe not my biggest, but a serious complaint I have about it. I feel like tonally Anderson did not get whatever he was going for. No. Because it's not this Tarantino, full commitment Tarantino. Right. Over the top, right. Totally ridiculous, this kind of ultraviolet done in this very amusing way, right? Even something like Inglourious Bastards is funny.
And we had just watched Once Upon a Time in Hollywood the night before.
Okay.
And it was a really interesting contrast.
Yes.
To see, or maybe after, but it was, but we watched them close together. And it was again, that the end of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is so over the top, is so Tarantino.
Yes.
And again, seeing them sort of side by side was very, very interesting and exposed a lot of the holes in Battle.
And that's the thing, is that I think it seemed to me to be extremely straightforward. And obviously you have the weird little moments, like when he is trying to, he can't remember, the sort of taglines, he can't remember the codes.
Right.
And you have these kind of weird, tiny little moments. But again, for a film that, as you say, is so long,
yes,
I was like, okay, it seems pretty straightforward to me.
Yes.
In that I feel like the one notes are there on purpose. In the sense that he can't do anything better. I feel like he was so committed to the political message that he didn't allow himself. And so to me, the thing I utterly hated the most, and then I'll shut up for a little while about it. Right. The thing I hated the most, so Tiana Taylor's character, is an actual murderer.
Yes.
And not just a murderer. Right. A murderer of a black working class man. Right. And the film never resolves this. And so you have this kind of my dad told me she was a hero, but now I realize she's a rat. Right. And I was like, well, I think the problem is that she's a murderer, again, of a black working class man. And so any kind of commitment that the French 75, we don't really know what they're about.
We don't.
I think it's really fascinating that when the film begins, in 2009, it's during the Obama administration, something the film isn't particularly clear on. And so I thought that was, again, in terms of saying, what tone are we going for here? Is this a straightforward sort of political film? Is it satire? Is it just this, again, kind of over-the-top Tarantino-esque thing? I didn't think it worked in any of those ways.
Yeah. I hear what you're saying. I mean, the questions of what is the French 75? What are they committed to, other than just anarchy, stirring shit up. I thought there was the editing in terms of too many things blowing up. The idea that they just want to raise hell could have been, that one scene with Sean Penn was enough for me. Yeah. In terms of, I didn't need to see any more action on their part in terms of being rebellious to understand what their purpose was. Yeah. I didn't need all those scenes in the beginning of her family and the baby and all of that. There's no reason for it. We understand she's a badass, she's a revolutionary, but in the end, she is going to flip. And I mean, that's, and then she runs, and then we never see her again. So the beginning of the movie, for me, could have easily been 15 minutes. And then, before he is on the lam with the daughter. And because the whole point of 16 years later is that Sean Penn now has to prove that he's not, is or isn't, the father of this mixed race child. And it took a very long time to get there. And so my criticism was that the character development was sacrificed for all of this other exposition that really didn't go anywhere. And so, like, while I love Sean Penn, and I love Benicio, and I love Leo, and I actually thought that the daughter was fantastic with Leo, and that their relationship was really interesting.
Yeah,
none of them were fleshed out in a way that made a whole lot of sense in terms of forwarding the storyline. But I liked the ideas so much in some ways that I still enjoyed the film. And I still enjoyed the filmmaking. And again, after, we'll talk about North by Northwest later and those car chases. But that car chase at the end, which, you know,
with all the hills.
Yeah. And you see that in the beginning of North by Northwest. And so to kind of contrast those, I think there was a lot of, I'm going to kind of just go on my artistic journey rather than let's forward the plot and even, you know, the nuns, right? The nuns are interesting to me.
Yeah.
And but I want to know more about them. I mean, there's a lot of characters in this film that I'm just kind of like, who is this person? I want to know more about them. The friends of the daughter, right? The high school.
Yeah.
That's interesting too, right? For me, all of it were kernels of interesting people, but without any real imagination in terms of a fuller storyline.
Which is so interesting because, again, even thinking about the Julianne Moore character in Boogie Nights, right? Where we know a lot about her, and in part it's because it's Julianne Moore, right?
Right.
But I feel like a character like that in this giant ensemble film like Boogie Nights, right? Even a character like that we understand pretty well. Or say John C. Reilly in Magnolia.
Sure.
And so that was interesting, and that obviously this is not a big ensemble film.
No.
But even thinking about the ideas, I don't know what the ideas are in that film. I don't know what he is trying to say. And in part, that was why, okay, and we'll talk about Running on Empty a little bit later. One of the things I really liked about Running on Empty is that you have, okay, this couple, this is what their revolutionary group is after, stopping the Vietnam War. And the mother will even say, right, well, we kind of, once the war was over, the cause was done.
We were done. Right.
But what was so, I think, strange here is that we do have this kind of all over the map, like, oh, okay, so you're letting go, immigrants, illegal immigrants,
right?
But then also you're robbing banks, you're talking about the cause, and it's like, well, I'm not even sure what the cause is.
Right? It's just all authority. I mean, the bank scene really threw me. I mean, the immigrant. The immigrant activism made sense, but then once they got into like law firms and banks and other places, I was just sort of like, okay, is this just any form of authority? Is it? And also them going into the bank, right? And and again shooting a guard, right? And just ordinary civilians who aren't, you know, who are just at a bank. I mean, they're not being detained. They're not, you know, there's. It's just kind of to show their own power and to flex. That was confusing. And then the existence of this group 16 years later, it's like, well, what have they been doing? What's the cause? Like, what, right. I mean, what are they still standing for? And again, that's where I think like the Running on Empty, where still you're like, okay, well, they're still around, but clearly the main two characters have distanced themselves from that. And again, here you're like, it's funny that he doesn't remember the passwords and things like that. They're a great scene. That's a great scene where he's on the phone and he's like, I don't know what any of this is, and I just want to see my kid, basically. But you do wonder what they're fighting for anymore. And again, the beginning. Well, again, I think the scene with Tana Taylor and Sean Penn is a very good one and a very effective one in terms of storytelling. If immigrant, you know, activism is their main thread, then that would make sense. Because that's what then links later to Benicio del Toro and his like Underground Railroad thing, and all that's interesting. And if that were the only message, or that were the main thrust at least, it would make more sense. And that's why I'm saying the beginning just really needed to be edited. The parts that I think are supposed to be satire are the white nationalist parts.
And by the way, I had no idea that Tony Goldwyn was in this film until seeing him.
And Tony Goldwyn is fantastic. I mean, he's great. He is great. And again, and they are really funny. And I think that that's the quote satire. But it's juxtaposed in a way that is very odd with the rest of the film, because the Sean Penn character, in terms of being a white nationalist, you don't know that about him until much later.
Yeah.
Because in the very beginning, you're like, oh, he's really into the Tina Taylor
all these
character.
Yeah. And I think, by the way, I mean, that's, your mileage may vary, but in some ways, the whole sort of like him kind of lusting after Tiana Taylor. I mean, I understand obviously what Anderson is trying to say with that, but I think we're also potentially in a very Honora situation.
Yes.
In that, okay, but you, Paul Thomas Anderson, you seem to be objectifying her as well. And you're not really at a distance. So, I mean, I actually thought the whole sort of like erection scene with Sean Penn to be actually pretty vile. I found that to be really unpleasant. And I mean, again, it was just, I don't know. And sort of the close-ups on her ass, where obviously we're supposed, but I'm like, I don't know.
We're supposed to be her hypersexualization is part of her power. Oh, and that's what, at least that's what he's arguing, right? But then we get into the question of, well, is he objectifying her? Is he basically violating a whole bunch of tropes that we kind of want to undo now? But the other thing is that we never see her again. So because we're left with her, with this image of her being, both somebody who's using her sexuality to get power and also somebody who's just on the run, and also somebody who is a rat.
Yeah.
So it's an incredibly unlikable character. And we are left with no resolution on that front.
But that's okay, but this is where I actually felt like it really reminded me. We talked about this in the episode where we talked about Sinners, where I told you my suspicion. I feel like Ryan Coogler can never let a villain go, right? There has to be the kind of, not even redemption of the villain, a la Darth Vader or whatever, but there has to be this kind of like, well, the villain's kind of not that bad after all, in sort of a different way. And we talked about this, right, with sort of the vampire showing up at the end of Sinners, and, we see it at the end of Black Panther or whatever.
Sure.
And so it was really interesting to me, because it seemed to me that Paul Thomas Anderson was kind of stealing a page from the Coogler playbook in saying, well, you have that letter at the end where it's like, oh, well, and I'm like, wait a minute.
No.
Okay, so she's a murderer of the working class.
Right.
She abandoned her child. She was a rat. And now, but I feel like kind of all of a sudden we're supposed to think she's great. And
because she wanted to be a mom, but
wanted
just
to be a
couldn't
mom. And, and I'm like, and to me that was just so, it was just such a cowardly thing to do, where I felt like some executive or some friend or whatever said to him, well, we really don't want to end, with this like strong woman, who's been so powerful. We kind of don't want to end with her sort of being a villain. So let's have this kind of moment where she writes this letter to her daughter. And again, at one point, still then, when the daughter's kind of like, oh, this is so great, I have this letter from my mom. And it's like, your mom's a murderer. Again, the film absolutely will not resolve this. And I thought
and also the Regina Hall character is like, yeah, your mom's a rat.
Yeah,
and
I'm going to tell you.
And we all fucking hate her.
Yeah.
And then again, they're like, baby rat. I mean, she goes in there, and all those women are really distrustful of Willa.
Yeah.
Right? And that's interesting, right? Like what do legacies do, and it brings out questions about also this mother that she's never met and
has been told as a hero.
Right.
But that's the other thing, is that I was so curious about where, yes, I wanted something else cut and I wanted this in. I wanted to know, okay, when Leo tells his daughter, Bob, when he tells his daughter she's a hero, did he say, oh, and by the way, she murdered a man basically in cold blood?
Right.
Does Willie even know that?
Right.
And the film never tells us that.
Right.
And the reason why that was so important to me is that I do think, satire or not, he is trying to frame a particular moral binary in the film, right? But to me, the moral binary becomes extremely complicated, again, when you have the murder of a working class African-American man. And so I thought that was absolutely crippling to the film. And that's that's all I have to say about it for now.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because as I said before about maybe one of the other, I think it was Jay Kelly. Is that what the name of that one was?
Yeah, Jay Kelly.
Look, my bar is, I detest this thing, right? And I didn't detest this, and I enjoyed watching it. I love the performers that are in it. I think they did a great job with
I agree.
And because of that, I came away thinking this is a good movie, and it has a billion problems, and it's not my favorite movie of the year, but it's interesting and it's ambitious, and I can watch Sean Penn, Benicio del Toro, Leo forever, okay, doing those kinds of things. And so, and again, when you see Tony Goldwyn show up, and you're like, it's funny to see him. Are we supposed to think he's the president? And then you kind of think he might be the president, and then you realize he's like a total Nazi, and you're like, okay. He's and that's supposed to be funny, right? So, and those scenes with the white nationalists, which again are very, we're supposed to read them as satire, and that I think again that's why the movie is called satire, even though most of the movie isn't satire, and that's why when you were like, oh, watch Bob Roberts, right? And I was like, okay, this doesn't go with this other one. Even though
which is of course straight up satire about Republicans.
Right. Straight up satire. Yeah. And this wasn't straight up satire about Republicans at all. This was a different kind of story, and it's hard to describe exactly what the central story is. If you want to break it down and just say, well, it's about a man who wants to sort of save his daughter from the crimes of the past. Okay. And make sure that no one kills her.
Yeah.
That's okay. I can buy it.
Yeah. And again, I thought that he especially was fantastic.
He was.
And I will say, the one scene, actually my favorite scene in the whole thing, which I thought was so remarkable, and again, very Tarantino-esque, is when, is it Elena Haim? Is that the Haim? Yeah. When she exits the door, and you have this fantastic, I don't know, I mean, how many takes it took, when the door is sort of swinging open exactly as she's shot. And again, I was like, that's such a QT moment. But I thought it was so clever. And in general, again, he doesn't go for super showy things like that.
No.
And so I thought that, that worked. But actually, this is the real last thing I'll say.
Okay.
I honestly didn't really understand why the guy who first shot Sean Penn, right, to sort of get rid of the evidence, the Sean Penn evidence, I was like, well, I don't really understand why he's chasing the daughter. And that actually didn't make really any sense to me whatsoever. But anyway.
I guess in the theme of racial purity or something like that, but it doesn't really matter.
It's like, if Sean Penn's dead, why is it an issue?
I don't know.
It's not like he's going to go out and shoot all biracial young women or something. I just thought that was so odd.
Who knows?
Anyway,
it was again. I think there was a lot of liberty taken in that movie, and again, I'm okay with that. It was not completely misguided.
Yes. So would you watch it again?
I'm not sure. And again, Jim really, really didn't like it. And I think Alex liked it a little more than Jim did. But, Jim's main critique, and again, not to represent him on the pod or anything, but he was just like, I couldn't latch onto any of the characters because I didn't know enough about them.
Yeah, which is, I think, a fair criticism.
And that was his criticism.
Yeah, and I think that's fair.
Yeah. So, and again, I was like, I get that. And for me, I was willing to just take the whatever, the leeway they gave us with those characters and just kind of imagine. So,
well, I will say that I think since I watched One Battle After Another first, then I watched Running on Empty, another film that we wanted to talk about this time around.
Right.
And to me, Running on Empty in so many ways is a far superior film.
It is.
And I'm kind of glad that I saw it after, because I think that my reaction against One Battle would have been even more severe, because we have fundamentally the same kind of plot. So we have, in this case, 1960s, early 1970s revolutionaries who are protesting the Vietnam War, involved in a bombing at a lab. They end up blinding and ultimately paralyzing a janitor who was not supposed to be present in the building. And so we have really a family story about the two revolutionaries who go into hiding, much like Bob and Willa, go into hiding, adopt other identities. But in this case, we have two children who, again, know and have had to move repeatedly, take on different names. And it really is a family story. I thought this was really fantastic. And I couldn't believe I'd never seen it before.
No, and what's funny is, so I had seen it before.
You had, okay.
But forgot about it.
Okay.
And when I was watching it again, I was like, right, that's going to happen. Like, it was starting to come back to me. I definitely had seen it before, but, with completely fresh eyes. And I also thought it was terrific. I think the storytelling in Running on Empty is so tight. And given that it is a little under 2 hours, and that they move, they move in, clearly they've moved many, many times in their life. But we see them move once. And the very beginning of the film is them, getting a tip that the FBI is onto them, and then they have to move to New Jersey from Florida. And so we see them move, and we see the ramifications of them forming ties and connecting with people, but also having to lie about who they are and having to
learn new names.
Constantly be on the watch. And also that while the two children, and one is 17 and one is 10, as they've aged, it's become more and more of a problem that, they form connections and have to leave, and that
think about the future.
And that in the case of River Phoenix, who's our 17-year-old son, right now he is in a situation where he is considering college. And I guess the assumption had always been that he wasn't going to go to college. He was just gonna be with the family forever and take care of the parents. And that also they make the point that having the kids makes the parents legitimate, and is what allows the family to travel as a unit, and for the parents to kind of keep their guard up and to disguise themselves, because they seem like these just like normal family, just doing jobs and sending their kids to high school or middle school or whatever. But in the film, River Phoenix then has to make all these choices, or at least think about choices of whether he's going to tell his girlfriend who he really is, or whether he's going to stay or leave, or whether he's even able to stay or leave.
And it was, since he's a very talented pianist, and one of his teachers is pushing him, encouraging him to apply to Juilliard, and that this will be his future.
Right.
And one of we also have this sense, right, the father, played by Judd Hirsch, his position is absolutely, if these children go off and do their independent lives, we will never see them again. Right. Once every 6 months, secret meetup, because the FBI will immediately be on them. And so there also is this sense that this is one way to avoid jail. Yes. And this is this constant threat. And so one of the things I thought was an interesting comparison with One Battle After Another is that obviously we see stasis in One Battle After Another, right? They have their new identities. They are in this place.
Right.
And as far as we know, 16 years have gone by and nothing has happened. And one thing I thought was really sad and very rich about Running on Empty is that you do have this okay, what is your name now? Right. And this constant sort of refreshing of these identities. And I was like, Jesus, how does a 10-year-old kid remember all this
6
stuff?
Names and 6 different schools and hair colors.
And so we have all of this apparatus, of exactly that, They are always living in kind of these sort of, I don't know how to say it. Marginal, sort of impoverished situations, Jobs where they can be paid cash. And, always doing, this constant lying. And again, not something we see in One Battle After Another, It is completely a life based on daily lies in all of these different ways. And so I thought that was really interesting.
And so, among 4 people. Whereas Leo is gonna lie, but Willa is
just like a
normal teenager.
These are my friends.
I mean, she knows that her mother has died, and some things about her father, but her father also is a pothead, and he's not a drug addict, or however you want to call it. It's a burnout. It's not like he's even going to a deli cook job the way that the Judd Hirsch character does. And so Leo is just kind of laying in his house, smoking weed, and Willa is going out and about as just a regular teenager, whereas these 2 kids in Running on Empty have to keep up the facade and work very hard to do it.
work very hard to do it, and it's very clear, say, in terms of their social lives, right?
Yeah.
These are kids who don't have people over.
Right.
Right? It's a big thing when the girlfriend comes over.
Yes.
This is kind of
Yes.
shocking to the father.
It is.
And again, having to negotiate these different names and all of these things with a stranger. And so I think that what all was so, again, heartbreaking about, and so many things are heartbreaking about this movie.
So many things are heartbreaking.
But the idea that these kids, again, I mean, it's like, how do you not have PTSD?
Oh.
So you're terrified of the FBI, right?
Right.
You can't trust anyone.
Right.
Constantly the different names. And one thing, of course, that comes up over and over again that we don't, again, really get in One Battle is the idea that these children are being punished for the sins of their parents, right? This is reiterated over and over.
Right. And to the extent also, which is so interesting, they have curiosity about their grandparents.
Yes.
River Phoenix, when he goes to the Juilliard audition, he then goes to see his grandmother, his maternal grandmother, and that they're curious about their family, right? And that they're not able to have any other familial relationships with people who are alive. And of course, we don't see that in Battle either. And that he sees his grandmother, and that he also knows that his grandmother has some relationship with Juilliard. So it's in the family, and his mother is the one who taught him how to play the piano, and she, in another life, would have been
gone to Juilliard
a piano
herself.
virtuoso. And so there's all this talent, and there's all this promise. And I think that's another thing about the film that I really, really liked, is that even though it's a film about a family on the run, or government activists, however you want to think about it, it's also about talent that can't be unleashed.
Yeah.
And because River Phoenix, clearly, I mean, if you can go to Juilliard, he has all this promise, and he has all this support. And it's also talent that Christine Lottie has as well, but she can't show anyone. She can't play the piano. She can't even tell the piano teacher or the music teacher that, hey, guess what? I know how to play.
She's a receptionist getting paid with cash.
Right.
And so that, I think, as you say, so we have this exposure to the rest of the family. It's a very clear idea, right? So we have references to Judd Hirsch's parents, right? As he says, he's like old Russian Bolsheviks or whatever.
Right.
And then his mother has died. He hasn't known it. And obviously we have a scene where she is with her father from Law and Order. Love seeing Stephen Hill. I thought that scene was fantastic. When she's talking, absolutely just incredible.
It's
so beautiful. But needless to say, what I also really liked about the film is that their political identities, again, are so clear, right? As we talked about a little while ago. So it's very clear, right? They are student activists protesting the Vietnam War. Right. This is it, right? They are at a lab that is manufacturing napalm. Right. They've been honest with their kids about it, right? This is what we're doing. It was killing people.
Former SDS members,
Patty Hearst,
but they're not continual revolutionaries. They are done.
They are done. And again, and as we said, she says this explicitly. But what I really, really liked then is that even though we have the same kind of, sort of shadowy connections, right, making the phone calls and the networks that we do in One Battle, she's very clear, right? This is not what we're doing anymore. One of their friends, whatever, that
former lovers, whatever.
He says, you are living this bourgeois life, right? You basically are the classic
capitalist
American,
pigs,
this is what you're doing.
Right.
But one of the details that I thought was so great, again, in terms of really clarifying kind of the political identities of these people, was when Judd Hirsch is like, I don't want him playing piano, because that's basically European bourgeois.
Right.
They have to be listening to James Taylor or whatever. And I was like,
rock and
James
roll.
Taylor's kind of, But I thought that was so fantastic, because of course that's exactly, right, what a sort of late 1960s, early 1970s, right, communist would say, like, oh my gosh, that's not the music of the people. Mozart, that's for the elite. And I thought that was so fantastic. Just this little tiny, tiny thing that illuminates, right, this character, I think, really well.
Really well. But he also, in another scene that I thought was great, says to the kids, here are guns. We don't use them. And that's the end of it. Yes. So we're not going to go rob a bank with this other guy who's now doing that just to go get the pigs or take down the man. Whatever. Yeah. No, we're not doing that anymore. We don't do guns. And again, a huge contrast with Battle.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that we just kind of live our lives now, and we did what we did in the past, and we're just going to kind of continue on and be decent members of society.
Yeah. And do one thing.
and do, unionization and food banks and Greenpeace and things like that. But we're not going to in any way
hold up a bank and then basically rationalize it to ourselves, right? As being some sort of political action. And as, again, we see in One Battle, right? Where it's like, we're robbing a bank. Why are they robbing a bank? Who knows? Who knows? Other than to, again, fund the revolution. Right. And so I thought that was it was just so, we talked about characterization of One Battle. The characterization here is so fantastic.
It really is.
It's just brilliant. And you do have this, again, the idea that the two of them, the two parents, are from very, very different backgrounds.
Yes.
The sense that the sort of wealthy, waspy parents of Christine Lottie, that they blame Judd Hirsch's character, right, for dragging her into activism.
Much. And also that the two of them maybe weren't meant to be, maybe she was in love with the other guy who went to rob the bank.
Anyway.
But for whatever reason, they found each other, they're together, they escaped together, and now they've built this life.
That in effect,
that they really struggle, and that Christine Lottie's like, you're right, he has to go to Juilliard, he should live his own life, and Judd Hirsch is like, no, we made this promise that we were going to stay together as a family unit, and all four of them have, and to some lesser degree, the youngest child, he's not as fleshed out as much. He's just like a little kid.
Yeah.
But, I mean, and River Phoenix, who's so brilliant in the film, who's so brilliant, and who, on the one hand, is so vulnerable, but also so mysterious, because he can't tell anyone who he is. And at the same time, he has to balance his own interests, piano, classical music, girls, like normal high school stuff, baseball, but also can't really fulfill any of these things without major consequences.
Yes.
And at the breaking point where he's like, I have to tell you who I am, right? And you can just see how painful that is and how difficult that is. And it's an amazing scene.
It is. And also with this awareness that whatever life he builds will just be sort of removed from him, right? As soon as his dad says it's time for us to be on the run again,
right?
That whatever he has built in any particular place, right? The baseball team in Florida or the Juilliard audition, all of these things are just taken away.
And the dog.
Oh my God, when they leave the dog.
But also you get the sense they've left other dogs.
Yes.
So when they leave the dog, they're like, well, it's just another
someone
dog.
Else
Someone else will get him. I mean, it's terrible.
It is terrible.
It's terrible. And when the younger son, again, they have so many names.
Yeah, I know.
It's hard to remember
whatever his name is.
When he says he got to take his piano, it's
and I
just
couldn't take JoJo
so
or whatever.
Sad.
It is sad.
That they're not able to take anything with them.
Well, and especially I'm like, why did you even bother putting the dog in the van? Why did you even do that in the first place?
Right.
But something else that I thought was so good about it, again, that One Battle really has no interest in, is that when you have, because River Phoenix's character is 17 and the father is this kind of pater familias, we're doing this, we're moving here. And when River Phoenix says, you're the man now, right? You told us to challenge authority.
Right.
You're the authority. And I was like, of course that's a conversation that a family in this position would have.
Right.
Right. We're saying, oh, wait a minute. Why do I have to live your way when you basically questioned all of these things to the point of violent political activism?
Sure.
So I thought that was really a wonderful thing to do. Again, I was so, I don't want to say surprised, because of course it was so exciting and so sad to see River Phoenix.
It
was so well done, and as you say, for a fairly short film.
Yes,
it was so
multi-layered. It covers a lot of ground.
Yeah,
it
really
covers
does.
Grounds of class. It covers grounds, of course, of these smaller family stories. But I mean, the same dynamics. I don't want to get too much off track, but something like A Stand By Me, where you're getting again a smaller story, 4 characters, all different, short in length, but you really understand who these people are. And I feel like in River Phoenix, of course, in both of them.
Sure.
But he's so expressive, but at the same time with such a kind of quiet presence. And again, I went and read a whole lot about him afterwards, just kind of remembering and the relationships that he had with his co-stars and with Keanu Reeves and with Harrison Ford and all of these people that had worked with him, and just their memories of how amazing and talented and this rising star of his generation, defining star of his generation at the time. And you can really see it in this film. And I think that's one of the, again, another contrast that we've talked about is the undercharacterization of Leo or
Yeah.
whoever.
Yeah, absolutely.
In battle, here you really know who these people are.
You do.
And it didn't take, I mean, if we compare it with the Americans, and there certainly are a lot of comparisons
Yeah, completely.
with the Americans, but it didn't take 5 seasons or whatever for us to understand that.
Yeah,
I mean,
to flush
this
it
is a film where in a very short amount of time, you really do understand all of these people and what makes them tick and why they would, again, there's no right answer at the end either. I mean, of course, you want River Phoenix to live his life and to go to Juilliard and to be with his girlfriend, but on the other hand, you don't want the family to break apart.
And they might, who knows when they'll see each other.
Right. And that's it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking when Christine Lottie says to Stephen Hill, I'm soon going to be in your position where I never see my child again. And that's just...
God, that scene, I have to say, when she gets up from that table and says, like, I love you, Dad, or whatever, Stephen Hill sort of tries to almost get up and start to cry. It was unbelievable. It's one of the best scenes I think I've ever seen in film.
It is unbelievable. Yeah. It is unbelievable.
And I will say, and something else I like before we start talking about North by Northwest, which of course is much more lighthearted in many ways. I think that what also, the sort of right note that it hit was, again, in terms of sort of the moral capacity and sort of the moral quality of these characters, again, as opposed to one battle. Because I think it's not simplistic, right? In the sense of like, okay, napalm was killing children. Right. So we have that. Napalm was killing children. This is an evil act. We took action against this immoral thing. The killing of this man, or the paralyzing and blinding of this man, was an accident, right? We did not intend.
That we feel terrible about.
And I really liked that. I liked the fact that then, in effect, the way that they've set it up, especially with Christine Lottie's character, is that this is her punishment.
Yes.
Right? She does intend to turn herself in once her youngest child is old enough to kind of fend for himself.
Sure.
We don't really see that with Judd Hirsch. But I liked that, and that it didn't just come out and say, like, wow, these people were terrible for being involved in this political activism, because it's made very clear why they did it. Mm-hmm. But also, right, there's not this like, well, you kind of murdered that guy, and we're never going to talk about it again. And so I thought that was really, it just made it so much more complex.
Right, like the cause justified him dying.
Yeah.
They don't say that.
They don't say that.
In a way that, again,
like, sorry, it was just a second.
Battle, again, it's like our cause justifies us shooting whoever we want or doing whatever we want. And they're saying, no, in fact, we are repenting for this unfortunate consequence
that we did not intend.
Yeah. Of our revolution or activism or however you want to think about it.
Yeah. Well, the last thing before we move on is that, and you and I think have already said this, but it really is so interesting to think about River Phoenix, right, playing the Leonardo DiCaprio role in one battle. I mean, he'd be, 55, 56 now?
Yes.
And I think that would be so interesting.
It would be.
Don't do drugs, kids. Don't do drugs. Especially don't do speedballs.
No.
Don't do that.
No.
Don't do the heroin, don't do the cocaine, and definitely don't do them together.
No.
Unless you want to, again, like, die, sadly, as River Phoenix did at age 23.
Yeah.
23?
Yeah.
On a sidewalk in LA.
Oh.
In front of a club.
Yeah.
It's just so depressing.
Really terrible and depressing. And again, watching these movies, watching this movie, but then also some of the other River Phoenix movies, or just thinking about them and how brilliant he was in them is just, And to think he would have had all the DiCaprio roles.
Yes, he would have. He would have.
And DiCaprio saw him that night at the Viper Room.
Oh,
and he's like, I didn't really know him, but I admired him, and he was one of the greatest actors of our generation. I wanted to get to know him. I wanted to work with him, and I saw him like right before he died.
I mean, even just thinking of like when he is simply in, right, the Raiders of the Lost Ark, which one is that? Oh, Holy Grail.
Right.
When you just see him at the beginning for a few minutes as the young Indy.
That's right.
He's remarkable. So electric, so charismatic.
Yes. And Harrison Ford said, this kid not only reminds me of myself, but looks like me when I was a little boy. Right.
It's so sad.
Yeah.
I mean, Heath Ledger is extremely sad. But at least Heath Ledger had the opportunity, right, to do these mature roles. Yeah. You know, he had been able to be in Brokeback Mountain, among other things, and it was just River Phoenix.
He had a child.
It's tragic.
It's so tragic. It's so tragic.
Well, again, on a lighter note, but also in our theme of being on the run, being chased, and having issues with identity, we also wanted to talk about one of the many super fantastic Alfred Hitchcock films, North by Northwest.
A classic, and probably one of the greatest films ever made.
Ever. Just such a fantastic film. And I always think Steven Soderbergh is a huge fan of North by Northwest, which to me makes a lot of sense. And so one of Hitchcock's absolute great film, I think 1959. 1959.
Yes.
So starring the absolutely amazing Cary Grant. So delicious.
Yes.
So delicious. No matter what age, no matter what.
And
so delicious.
And so spicy.
And so spicy. And Ava Marie Saint looking very beautiful. And so different, say, from On the Waterfront, where she's kind of this innocent ingenue, but here just being so, again, beautiful and fantastic. So a film about mistaken identity, about the Cold War, about spycraft, about treason.
Right.
And
in this case, Cary Grant is not a revolutionary. Not really particularly political in any way.
An advertising exec. Again, I love to think about this in terms of Mad Men. Right? So Mad Men starts at, 1960? So basically you can imagine Roger Thornhill in the world of Don Draper.
Absolutely.
Which is a fun thing to think about.
Exactly.
Having their Gibsons. Drinking their Gibsons at lunch.
Right. And so Cary Grant's character, Roger Thornhill, is mistaken for
George Kaplan,
an FBI agent by a group of very, very bad men.
Very bad men who are collaborating with the Russians. It's never said explicitly, but we know it's the Russians because we have a reference to the Cold War. And as it turns out, there is no such person as George Kaplan. So it's an even worse case of mistaken identity in that Cary Grant's character has been mistaken for a person who doesn't actually exist, who's been set up as a dummy to hide the real agent who is passing information on to the U.S. government to catch. And James Mason is so evil, in this really fantastic way, as a person who is selling secrets to the Soviets,
right. But we also learn again while he is on the run, very much like Running on Empty, that additional character traits unfold, that he is witty, that he is loving, that he actually is more committed to causes than he might think
and
in
he's
the
braver.
beginning. And he's much braver. He is willing certainly by the end of the movie, to literally go out on a limb, for Eva Marie Saint and for his government and to serve the causes of the Cold War, however you want to think about it. So it's about somebody who in the beginning is sort of spineless and
just a lush and a bon vivant, and again this very slick advertising man,
who eventually becomes a dashing hero and saves the day but in the middle of all of it are the brilliant twists and turns that each scene has, in where Cary Grant is mistaken, but then manages to somehow escape, escape capture, and is then put into another scenario where he either has to pretend or he has to run, and is able to do it in all kinds of creative and interesting ways.
And we do have what is, of course, so famous about the film is that his kind of character arc changing, it is being paralleled by our geographic movement, that we start obviously in New York City. We start at the Plaza Hotel in New York City, and then we end up at Mount Rushmore. And so we have this wonderful sort of all of these kind of vistas, where we see, okay, now he is in Chicago, now he is in the boondocks of Indiana, getting chased by a crop duster, one of the most famous scenes, of course. And then again ends up at Mount Rushmore running around. And so I like this idea that there's not just so much movement, but as you say, all of these scenes where the fact that he is pretending to be someone else, he's being mistaken for someone else, that it means that he does have to get out of these. And the fact that he's in a train.
Yes.
We have all of these wonderful scenes in the train.
Yes, wonderful scenes.
And what is also, I think, so remarkable and fun about North by Northwest is that it is pretty unapologetically sexy.
It is a very sexual film. Yes. For 1959, this is a film that has endless sexual references.
They're not
and they're not at all. One of the first things he says to her is how can I keep myself from making love to you or something like that. I'm like, this woman you just met on a train. All of the comments about taking off his clothes and him in the shower, and then of course him hiding in the berth, and then she's like, well, you'll have to sleep with me up here, and it is clear that the two of them have had sex sex many times.
Yes, many times. And of course, and she even tells us. She even says, the book that I brought with me is too boring. So basically we have to spend all night doing it, pretty much. I don't, and as far as he's concerned, right, this is just a pickup. She just is absolutely just down for the sex, and that's it. It's just been this remarkable coincidence. And even though he knows that she believes him to be a murderer.
Right.
And
but for some reason, he's so dashing. She's going to hide him and and elude the police and things like that because he is just Cary Grant.
And what's so, of course, then again, fantastic about it is that we do see that he experiences sort of sexual jealousy, that he is genuinely hurt. His feelings are hurt when he believes that she has just used him as part of her relationship with James Mason, part of basically sort of keeping him busy. And so I love that. We also have this kind of wounded pride, which ends up putting her in a position of danger. And so we go again from him being this kind of rake, he has these 2 ex-wives, to feeling very hurt because he just basically had sex with this woman and now she is...
And he's really, really... hard on her. I mean, gosh, all the names he calls her, and the way that he talks to James Mason about her, and again, it's really, really interesting. But then it's so endearing when he does try to save her, when he's throwing her the matchbook, and when he's fearing for her, and they're kind of and they're colluding together, and that's a wonderful part of the movie when they start to figure out a way to escape all of this, but then of course the end gets a little wonky. Right?
So we have been, it is, you would never call it certainly a political film, right?
No.
And the film, of course, it goes without saying that we know James Mason is a villain because we don't know why he's selling secrets to the Soviets. So there's no sense that he's a true believer. Right. It's not really clear if he just wants money. Right. And then there's a whole sort of cadre of people around him who are assisting him in his diabolical plans. But in a sense, we do, as we were talking about a minute ago, we have someone who seems to be completely apolitical, but then ends up being, I don't want to say sacrificial, I think that's going too far.
No.
But sort of discovering his, I don't know, better
moral
nature,
fiber.
Well,
also the other thing, which of course the very final scene when you see the 2 of them like married in this
back in the train,
but also that they've both accepted traditional gender roles, which neither one of them had in the movie.
Yes,
and
that's a good point.
Of course, Eva St. Marie is who knows how many men she's slept with as an agent, right? And he has, of course, been married twice already. He sees women as sort of frivolous, but by the end, marriage is the answer to the problems that both of them have faced. So in that way, it is very much a Cold War film, and of course, all the bad guys die, and nobody who's good, nothing bad happens to anybody who's good, and but there is, of course, that Hitchcockian, suspense and duplicity and questioning of identity and things that we see in some of his other films, and that makes it, again, so terrific. But also in terms, I think your point about them being on the run, which is different than the other 2 films, which are much more static in terms of the actual momentum. We don't see a whole lot of, although we do see a lot of running in battle, we don't see Leo and Willa on the run the whole time. We see Leo looking for Willa.
Yes, and I think also the geography is always very unclear.
Yes.
Right? We're kind of like, okay, what is the distance?
They're in Colorado. We're in LA in the beginning, and they're somewhere in Colorado.
And obviously, Teyana Taylor's character, right, she goes to Mexico. Right. We have no idea where she is, right, but she's in Mexico. But yes, I think there's this kind of almost intentional vagueness.
Yes.
Right?
Whereas North by the Northwest, again, as you said, we start out on the East Coast and we wind up in Mount Rushmore.
And this is the title of the film, right? The title, I think that obviously to a lot of people, that title has always seemed very strange. That we basically have a film that is named after Northwest Airlines. Right? And that's the whole thing. It's like, it's not complicated. They are going north via Northwest Airlines.
Right.
And I probably should have looked up, right? Why did Ernest Lyman do that anyway? But it's made so clear that yes, we are traveling that very particular geographical path. as he becomes a better man.
Yes.
But we also have, right, that little exchange with Ava Marie Saint, where she says, well, life has been very hard, right, because of men like you. So as you say, we do have the sense of her sexual past that has just been, right, for whatever reason. But he then, Cary Grant's character, Roger, he is then he's the symptom, he's the cause, but then he's also the cure, as you say, right, through their marriage.
And like another contrast, which again, if we're just going to go back to like what you liked about Leo, this is not a dressing down of anybody in North by Northwest.
Yeah.
This is a glamorous run.
Fabulous
outfits, everyone's gorgeous, and Cary Grant even gets his dirty suit cleaned and pressed. Okay, so no one is willing to have a hair out of place, no matter where they are, no matter what the circumstances. They can be hanging off a cliff and they look fabulous.
But I mean, to me, it's so interesting again to think about On the Waterfront. Not that we were supposed to be talking about On the Waterfront, but again, you have the idea that you see in North by Northwest. Ava Marie Saint has been turned into Hitchcock's ideal woman, right? And it is so fascinating to me. That character is so fascinating because I'm like, okay, is she supposed to be really an industrial designer, right? This is a quote unquote career woman. And then I think it's made kind of unclear whether this is just her cover story or whether, again, who knows, right? She tells us how she got hooked up with James Mason. But it's like, well, is she a working woman who, again, is so brash, so bold sexually?
Right.
And I think that is such a question mark. But it is, I love that we have, again, this kind of ponytailed, very simple, sort of sweet, demure girl on the waterfront. And she has basically become Grace Kelly by the time we get to North by Northwest.
Yeah.
And, obviously none of that is accidental, right? That was the point.
Right.
That was the point.
Right.
But I told you, I've been watching Alfred Hitchcock Presents. And those are from 1955, 1956. That's when the first season was on. And they're so tight in terms of the script. But you really, and obviously Hitchcock at that point had been a filmmaker for so many years anyway. But you really sort of see, right, all of this DNA that appears in his sort of later films in the 1950s and 1960s.
Yeah.
I love him so much. And we could talk about Hitchcock for like 6 hours. But we won't.
It's interesting, again, to see these three films that, I'm not saying there is Hitchcock in Battle, because I think PTA is definitely more influenced by more contemporary filmmakers. But it does go back to something like North by Northwest to think about momentum, to think about identity change, and all the themes we have in the podcast today, and the kind of lineage between these three films, and also to think about the two films, the later films, which have so much interpersonal development, characterization, questions. You really care about whether these people are going to be together, both Eva Marie Saint, Cary Grant, and the family.
Yes,
whereas in Battle, you're like, okay. I mean, if they kill Willa, that's going to be sad, but I don't really know whether she even likes Leonardo DiCaprio
we don't know what we never. Sorry to interrupt, but we never see the ramifications of he's not her biological father.
That's right.
Right, and obviously she's going to recognize him as her father, but that is never unpacked. We don't even, as far as we know, Leo doesn't know that. I'm trying to remember.
Leo doesn't know that he is not the biological father.
And so that's a huge question mark, and that's something else I think that would be interesting in that film. To see the difference, because obviously he's so committed to her, as his family, but that, who knows? I think that was a missed opportunity in terms of complexity and layering.
For sure. Well, let's move on to thinking about whether we have any books that would go with these films.
Well, even though it's very apolitical, I'm going to suggest The Return of Martin Guerre by Natalie Zemon Davis. And this is actually one of the rare historians' books that was turned into a film, a French film starring Gerard Depardieu, I think back in the 80s. And it is a really interesting story, a true story about a man who kind of came back from the war and with a different identity. And his wife began to suspect that he was not her husband. And so in terms of, no one's chasing him, but in terms of identity, sort of changes, what it means to be part of a family with kind of uncertain identity, I think that it's a neat kind of supplement. What about you?
My recommendation is going to be Tom Engelhardt's The End of Victory Culture, which goes more along with the Running on Empty, well, all of them in terms of Cold War, Vietnam, American might, American politics, why America for since its beginnings has thought it could just go out and kick ass and unapologetically, whether from the right or the left, really, and then the way in which that sort of came apart. And so it's a contextual book that puts, I would say, all three of these texts in some dialogue with Engelhardt's thesis, and it's an easy read and it's an interesting read, and I think it will shed some light on certainly some of the American history that's represented in all of these films to some degree.
Well, that sounds great. And we should also remember that there is, of course, a Law and Order episode with Mandy Patinkin about the same kind of thing that we see.
Look, there is a Law and Order episode for everything. And by the way, this has nothing to do with anything but except Law and Order. But there is a new show called Him and Her, or His and Hers on Netflix, which I just started watching, which has the guy who held Mariska Hargitay hostage. It stars...
I did not see that.
It stars him and Mikey from The Bear.
Oh.
And Tessa Thompson.
Oh.
Yes. So I'm watching that now. It's set in Atlanta. It's a murder mystery. I've watched the first episode and kind of curious to see where it goes. But it's interesting to see Mikey as an actual, like, living person who's starring in this series.
Well, because you didn't watch The Walking Dead.
I didn't.
Okay, because he's great in The Walking Dead.
Okay.
Not that I'm recommending, but I mean the first season of Walking Dead is terrific. But yes, because he's one of the main characters in that first season of Walking Dead.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is just, there's a couple things on TV right now that have just come out, like for the new year, and I was just looking around Netflix last night and put it on, and then but when it said this guy was also William Lewis, who stalked Mariska Hargitay for like 4 episodes and like held her in a cabin and did all kinds of sadistic things to her. I had to give it a go.
Always comes back to Law and Order.
Yeah, it always does. It always does. So we'll be watching the Golden Globes tonight, and maybe our next ep will feature one of those nominees or some of those actors, actresses, who knows. If you have something you'd like for us to talk about, you can always let us know, listeners, all 10 of you.
All 10 of you, we love you. And actually, maybe next time we should talk about The Housemaid, since Lauren and I went to go see The Housemaid over break.
For sure.
So we'll talk about...
sure, we have to talk about and we also have to talk about Rob Reiner.
Yes, we do.
So
we mentioned Stand By Me earlier. Yes. Again, both River Phoenix and Rob Reiner.
So tragic. So on that very unhappy, on that very sad note, happy Golden Globes, everyone. And we will see you next time. Until then, R.I.P. out.